Good morning. Happy hump day. It is Wednesday. My favorite commercial ever is the I guess I don't know. It's the camel commercial. I don't know. Forgot. Was that Progressive? That was Progressive,
Geico.
right? Hump day. That's still one of my favorite commercials ever. But welcome to this. We're looking forward to a great session today. We got Nate Brown here. Wave, Nate. We'll get an
Hello.
introduction to him in a little bit. While we're waiting for a few more folks to come in, because I know we usually do see a little bit of that, I want to share my screen for a second. And like I do, just kind of introduce many of you who may not be aware what we're all about here. So we are a collective, which has really meant that we're here to help you, and we're here to help your peers and the business and really the industry of CX drive change, in their businesses. Because if we're just here to measure, that's a waste of time. We're here to make change, but that means we also got to take care of ourselves as well. So the CX on the Rocks Collective does admit to the challenges today that things are kind of rough. There are layoffs. There are challenges with customer expectations. Goodness knows AI is changing everything on how we do it. But if you join us at CXOnTheRocks.com, and you just hit the join now button, fill out a few pieces of information, and you'll get access to all of the content, all of the sessions. And you really want to do that if you haven't already, because soon we're going to be transitioning. Instead of just doing stuff off of the Zoom and things publicly, we're going to bring it through the community, because we are trying to create really kind of exclusive access to this for those of you who join, and really create more dialogue, because that's what we're here more than anything else. But if you jump into this, then you can go and actually look at the collective information and the site. There's all sorts of content in here. You can look at events. You can look at, we've got courses coming up for consultants and practitioners, content, recordings of our past sessions, chats. Join us in the community. Join us on the platform and in the community, so that you can really increase the dialogue. Because again, we're here for, to help with advanced resources that are part of our partnership here, your advanced challenges and customer experience. So happy to have you guys join. So I'm gonna stop sharing here. So good group today. Awesome. Thanks for everybody for showing up. Appreciate that as well. We're going to flip things a little bit for those of you that have been to some of our sessions in the past. We're actually going to start with breakouts, and then we're going to move into Nate's session, because it's going to build on itself if you think about it. So we've actually got 3 breakouts going. We got one that's on really culture and strategy at businesses. How is CX coming into the culture and strategy conversation at organizations? Another is going to be about data and technology as well. And then the third one is going to be around career and consulting. How are things changing in the job hunt or hiring from that perspective, as well as in the consulting practices. So we're going to start with these breakouts, and the challenge or the opportunity to talk about in the breakouts is Nate's going to talk about accelerating change. So what's changing most in these areas, and talk a little bit about the the challenges that creates, and some solutioning if you have to share as well with your peers that want to talk about that topic. We're going to do that for about 10 to 15 minutes, really just kind of set the table, come back, and I'm going to ask a few folks to share, what they came from, and that's going to dovetail right into what Nate talks about today as well. So we're going to do that real quick. So Kellen is about to set that up, and Kellen, you can put me in that room. I will be there. So first up, join one of the discussions, join one of the breakout rooms, and you can see here that the rooms are now going. So welcome back. I'll try to remember what I just said. Welcome back. Hopefully you got some good dialogue. We ended up with 2 really full rooms rather than 3, but that's perfect. And so I'd like to ask, and if at the bottom of the screen, if you go to the React, there's a little heart, and raise your hand. I'd love for somebody to kind of share a little bit about what your takeaways were from the dialogue about what is changing, and what are the these challenges and opportunities we're facing right now. So if anybody like to hit the little react button or their hand, that'll keep us going. I'll start by just saying our room was really around it was about career and consulting. It was about what's going on right now, and we all admittedly know plenty of people, and there are a few in the room that are looking for work. And on the consulting side, everybody's always looking for work. So we're going to talking about what is it out there that's And there are layoffs going on, and there are still job descriptions. And in fact, I think, and if someone willing to jump in, I think it was Keely who talked a little bit about the job description, about just being, the job description was like NPS. I mean, a couple of you actually did that. Keely, you want to share a little bit on that?
I can jump in on the NPS comment. I think
Yeah.
that was mine, or I had started it.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
I was just commenting in the breakout that I think there's some misalignment between um, what some roles are seeking versus the way we're talking. And so the example I use specifically is that I interviewed for a role recently where the primary mandate for the role was to evangelize NPS and get the organization to understand the importance of NPS. And my comment in the breakout is that I just felt like that was missing the mark. And there's certainly value in NPS, but when that is the crux of the job, they're not understanding what the power of CX really is.
Yeah, and I think what was amazing about that dialogue, because there were a couple of people that had seen that or knew that that kind of was going on. It's like, made a little joke. Well, that's so 90s, right? Because it was. I mean, that's old school stuff. So we talk about change, accelerating change, and yet we're also talking about a lot of people are way behind the times in change. So they have to catch up even further to really understand what CX is. Who else would like to share something from the breakout? Stacy.
Yes, apologies, not on camera today. Next time. So our team talked about culture, and it's really hard to drive a customer-centric culture. And how do you really do that? And so some of the things that were discussed include, one, make sure that you're speaking the executive board language. Number one, speak their language. Two, a lot of companies are product centric. So the concept of give to get, work with your product teams and help them. And in turn, you get them to help you in creating that culture. And then third of all, don't eat the whole elephant, if that's the right saying, or boil the whole ocean. And that is like, take the initiative, regardless of your title, take the initiative and bring people together cross-functionally to solve a single problem. Take that and go to the higher ups and say, okay, it might require this little budget for a pilot. Let me show you how this can work before we scale. So those are three quick hits. So much more to say in that, but I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. Who else would like that? Matt?
Oh, just I think that was a really good summary, Stacy. I think we also had a good discussion around balancing formal and informal. And like formal elements are things like measurement and like getting the right linkage to outcomes. Like there's definitely a lot of discussion that is a repeat theme. But that a lot of change in the organization, particularly if you're starting smaller and expanding, there's a lot of leverage you can pull on the informal side around driving behavior adoption, around mindsets and rituals and storytelling and other things you can do that drive change, so that people need to kind of pick their spots. And culture, requires behavior change, not just launching product.
It really does. Absolutely. Now, I know one of the other things that we talked a little bit about, and maybe I'll ask Chris, you to jump in. We talked a little bit about the shiny object of AI, and honestly, in some ways, it's a catalyst for some of this change, but it's hitting businesses in different levels. You want to expand a little bit, Chris, on what you were talking about?
Yeah, and since we were only 5 minutes ago, but what I was thinking is, what's a more tangible thing, a more actionable thing to say? And what I would say is this, that at least in my experience of all the new shiny balls, AI is the shiniest of all the balls. But what I had failed to do when I was younger is use it as a slingshot. And what I mean by that is, yeah, get them excited. Talk about what they care about. AI, right? Oh, they care about AI. But then divert them into focusing on the customer, which we know they all need to do. Just take AI is going to help us have amazing growth and repeat sales, etc., by serving our customer. Right? And then be able, because nobody really knows what to do with AI right now. It's all bits and pieces. Then I think all of us, especially in the CX world, know something, give something specific that you can say, this is how we use AI to directly help sales, which they always care about, right? And it's because the customer loves us, right? So in other words, use the language we need to use and use the momentum. And the momentum right now is very clearly AI. And it'll be something else 10 years from now, but right now it's AI.
Thought your comment was so cool, that idea of the ball is so shiny that it's actually blinding executives from the importance of the customer. I thought that was a cool quote you had.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's AI is the sizzle, but customer centricity is the steak. But we got to get them in the tent first.
Yeah,
They gotta
absolutely.
I'll just add, so I came from a health plan, and there are a lot of things that you try to get your members to do, and there are some labor intensive things like member outreach. We actually had partnered before I left with a telephone, like a voice AI bot, basically, that made some very important phone calls for us. And the gist was that we were able to get in and influence how that was built. So I think it's coming. And as a customer experience professional, being part of how it's used, building the use case, laying in some user experience elements, brings relevance to the conversation and also adds value, because ultimately we increased the number of contacts that we made and the information we were gathering from members by a very large amount at a minimal cost. So, get in there and be part of the solution rather than, oh, that's AI, and, try to influence how that's implemented.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's a great way. When on that note, thanks for that addition, Keely. On that note, we're going to transition now to Nate Brown. So I know last month we had David Abern on, global speaker, and he said something about having the winning an award for his beard, but really the best beard in CX,
Yes.
Mr. Nate Brown,
Wow.
is joined us, and we actually just saw each other last week at CCW in Vegas, and he and I have been friends for a while, and he also has another community, kind of is called CX Accelerator, but he's going to talk a little bit about kind of continuing the dialogue of what we just did, of what's changing and how it's accelerating. So Nate, take it away.
Well, thank you, Sean, and thank you, everybody. It's great to see some familiar faces. Love this, the traction that you're gaining and the purpose of this particular cohort of people. I think it's just awesome, the vision that Sean has put out there for us. So yeah, we have been on the road together. We were at Reuters, we were at CCW, and there's a couple phenomenon that are out there right now. If we really look at what we believe is holding CX leaders back, it is an inability to influence change. I mean, at the end of the day, like, that's the most symptomatic thing. And there are some really compelling statistics around that. I mean, and these are not new. I mean, these have been around for some time, but anybody want to take a guess at the rate of successful change with a culture change initiative? How many of culture change transformations actually stick and succeed? What would you say? What would be your guess?
10%.
I'd say about a third.
Yeah. 10%. Yeah, 10%, would be common. Many of the analysts would agree with that. If we look at technology changes and AI implementation right now, what do you think that rate of successful change is?
30.
80.
So successful.
I say less because there's too much technology that's stifling everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's between 20 and 30% would be what most folks are saying in terms of successful implementation of the technology. So we have these change initiatives that are out there. The failure rate is exceptionally high. Sean, would you give the rate of change statistic that you gave at Frost and Sullivan?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, doing some research, and if you think about it, we used to be able to measure change by decade, once a decade, twice a decade, 3 times a decade. We're now sitting on one time, or actually multiple times a year, 2 to 3 times a year. We're seeing major shifts in how we do business. how we do serve our customers. And they're expecting that by 2027, it literally could be once a month, seeing that kind major changes once a month on how we do business with our customers.
That's insane. I mean, it's too much for any sane person to be able to keep up in an environment like that. So thank you for that, Sean. And that really was a wake up call for me in terms of, wow, it does feel like right now the odds are stacked against us. Like, the failure rate is so high, and the rate of change is only getting faster. The desperation, the shiny penny syndrome, as Chris talked about, it's only becoming more and more significant. So, I mean, what on earth do we do? And that was really the impetus. I put in the chat an article that we released through Metric Sherpa yesterday. And the title of that, and I'm not going to take credit for the title, it really was Justin, but your real job isn't CX, it's leading change. And as I think through the areas in my career where I have been successful, there were times at UL as a CX leader where I really had major impact. And there were other seasons where I really didn't. And then as a consultant inside of WB Games and Bosch and others, kind of some similar things were there. So I was really reflecting on what are the conditions and the factors that are present that make the ground fertile for change to be able to stick. And as a leader of change, how can we come in and ultimately help those things to grow in the best and fastest way? So I love this topic. I think the dialogue that we were having at the top of this hour is just wonderful. I don't think there's almost anything more important that we could be talking about than this. So, but I did want to offer some thoughts, and we'll continue the conversation together. But there's a couple things that I wanted to share, and I do love this quote from Maven Insights. CX strategy ultimately depends on two things: changing the mindset of the organization and collectively adapting to delivering the desired experiences. That's a simple quote, but there's a lot of things that I think are really profound inside of it. That idea of having a desired experience. Like, you've defined that, it's locked in. Like, this is what we're trying to achieve for our customers. And we together have an understanding of what a great experience looks like. This is what is truly going to differentiate us and the promise that we're ultimately making to our customers. But then it starts with mindset, and we get addicted to these outputs, these different things, these behaviors, and these measurable things in the organization. But like, ultimately, where the change has to begin is in the mind of the people that are serving customers, and in the mind of the executives in the organization that are setting the culture and making these decisions. So it goes back to that importance of education. And I think our role as a CX leader is so many things. It's that of a cheerleader. It's that of an educator. It's that of an aligner. But this is one of those moments where our education hat has to be there if we're going to be an effective change agent. And I really believe that in order to, as I've reflected on those seasons where I have been able to accelerate change the most, one of the common factors that was absolutely there is that there was a common language of change within the stakeholders that I was working with, that they could speak the same language of change. And in the case of UL, it was Lean Six Sigma. They did extensive training and extensive work to make that a consistent language of change. And as we thought about how we could make things better in the organization, and as we looked at the voice of customer engine and the things that we're servicing in terms of customer priorities, this is what would have the most impact in terms of being able to serve our customers better. All right, now how do we make a change here? And we all knew it would come into a DMAIC project. There was a way that we could tap into unused energy across the organization to ultimately help to solve that problem. There was consistency that was so powerful in that. But it doesn't have to be lean. And in certain environments, that wouldn't make sense, based on that model and what it is. But Prosky, the ITEL model, the DevOps, depending on the fabric and the nature of your organization and the things you're ultimately trying to create for your customers, there's a language of change that would make the most sense for you. But there is one that I feel like is quite universal and that I've used so often, and it's John Kotter's leading change model, which we'll get to in a second. But I did find this interesting. This idea of why change ultimately fails. Like why we started with that interesting statistic that 90% of culture change initiatives fail. 70 to 80% of AI projects are currently failing to make a meaningful impact in the organization. So what is going on there? Probably not a lot of surprises here, but the strategy was broken from the beginning. I do love that one of inflexibility, like that, creating a project on a concrete pillar instead of a palm tree that can ultimately morph and evolve alongside the needs of the project. Poor communication, of course, failure to address resistance. Who remembers Jean Bliss and her brilliant conversation around the power core in Chief Customer Officer 2.0? Does anybody remember that? And she's got a great a companion set of resources that she's titled it "How to Dance with the Power Core," and she talks about how if you're trying to lead change from a CX perspective in the organization, and you're hitting up against the power core of the organization. What is the power core? It's the group inside the organization that ultimately controls the budget, ultimately controls the strategic initiatives of the future. Every organization has that power core, and the importance of being able to make them an ally and to understand the importance not of CX, because that semantics here, but it's not the idea, the concept of customer experience that's important. It's the fact that when we as an organization do these things for our customers, this is how we grow the business. It's the customer centric outputs that we can ultimately earn together. And when we help the power core to see those things and earn them as an ally, that resistance ultimately goes away. But she has seen so many great CX initiatives ultimately fail because they weren't able to earn the power core as an ally. The disconnect in strategy and culture, unrealistic expectations. My goodness, that's so many of us where we've come into a role and and CX is one of those things that can so quickly become everything. There's a customer component to that, so that's going to fall over to the CX leader to ultimately resolve that problem. Everything can ultimately become CX, so we've got to be very precise in the changes that we are trying to make and the scope of those changes, and then no quick wins or momentum. So here's these any that you feel like are missing. What are some elements of leading change that could really make it stop or not be able to stick that aren't represented here?
I would add one.
Yeah.
And that's more acknowledgement to the emotional impact. I call them emotional highs. Because people are really buying and staying based on feelings. And in all of my time in the workforce, feelings don't belong. The word love just doesn't fit. But in reality, that we are humans who have feelings. And so by ignoring that, when we're mapping and designing the experience, I see that as a common problem, an opportunity.
Yeah, it's when you think about the mindset and what Stacy just talked about, I think about the twin pillars here, Nate, of as a senior leader. When we talk about power core, it's what is it going to cost me and what am I going to get out of it? That hard and fast investment, the ROI, right? When I think about the execution, that's the hearts and minds and the engagement, but the internal team that says, how is this going to make my life easier? How is it going to make it better? So the customer experience is an inside out sort of approach. So you get what you want in terms of investment and return.
Yeah.
My life becomes easier, which makes it easier for me to buy into the message. And then everything else becomes commentary at that point.
Smart. Yeah. Justin's really big on saying that CX is not a function. It's an outcome. that we ultimately generate together by bringing people across the organization in to the idea of these customer-centric objectives and outputs that we can create together. So the more that we rely on CX it being some department or function, the less we can accomplish what you just said, JP, I feel like. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think what we're talking a lot about is, a couple of you alluded to that you've got all of these opportunities, whether it's social, technology, et cetera, and you even said, Nate, it can become too much too fast, right? And that's where the challenge is for us is, true customer experience is kind of everything. Everything leads to the customer experience, but we've got to find those wins and quick wins. You got to get early and quick wins to drive that change as well.
So true. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
been a major attribute of the times where I have been successful.
Yeah. Yeah. The elephant in the room, though, feels like, but you all just touched on this very important point, is in going back to the top of your discussion, our failure, I would say, as CX organization to define what CX looks like in each of the functional areas, because it shifts that discussion from CX fixes everything to, guess what? Marketing, this is the way it looks for you. Sales, this is what it looks for you. Product, this is how CX looks for you. And so each person takes a bite out of that elephant, I think Stacy referenced, and with those associated measurables. So now everyone has a piece of it. And then CX can kind of live in its proper place as a department to do the other, derivative elements of that. But each person does have to kind of sign up for that. And we don't necessarily articulate that. So in the absence of that, the quote unquote CX leader ends up having to own everything. And, based on the stats, we see how effective that's been.
What you're highlighting, JP, is the challenge and the opportunity, which is that the CX leader has to drive collaboration and drive, engagement across a broad set of people that are not always naturally teaming together consistently.
Yeah.
So while everyone is always trying to collaborate in an organization, CX leaders often are working to drive alignment above them, to their peers, down, externally. There's a lot of effort that gets spent on driving change because it's more fragmented in the organization in CX because it's so holistic.
That's right. That's right.
Good comment. Yeah. Yeah. There is one as I reflect on in these, this was from a HBR article, Harvard, but there is one that I really felt like wasn't well represented here. It's kind of in the strategy culture disconnect, but as I reflect on the times where changes have accelerated forward, and we've had a bit of that renaissance of positive activity around customer centricity. I think I'll give an example from WB Games. There's a time where we had this really effective leader who was great at unifying people and getting people to trust. Like there was this foundation of trust, a foundation of psychological safety that she really built. And when that leader was displaced, changes would come to a screeching halt. And I do feel like that's an attribute that I've seen in any environment that I work in. It's the classic 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? Patrick Lencioni, like the base of that model is trust. And I've been reading this great book called The Fearless Organization. And it's around that idea of psychological safety and how we as CX leaders can help to establish that and create an environment where change is possible. So I feel like these are all things that are kind of up here in the pyramid, but if you don't have that circle of trust that's established, then it's going to be impossible for you to ultimately move forward with any type of change. What do you all think about that?
I'd love to just say one thing. I agree. My little bit of PTSD talking now is that I was hired into a company and they said, let's change this. We're an engineering company. Let's change this. Great. I come in, I move, I do. And then they say, Stacy, slow down. Whoa, slow down. So on one side of their mouth, they say this, and the other side, they say this. So I'd be like, which Stacy do you want? That's a fundamental problem.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. I mean, you've got to, and that's where, you did not feel truly supported. Like you weren't being backed up with the rate of change that you were trying to generate.
No, and I literally would say out loud, which Stacy do you want? So you
Yeah.
hired me for this, but then you're telling me I'm going too fast and penalize me. So I think that other people beyond myself is that I think that you have to come into a company and stick to your values and be in the right room.
Yeah.
Because if they're not embracing who you are and what you wanted to do and why they hired you, then you're in the wrong room, and that's a hard thing to look at, but it's a good question.
Well, yeah, and culturally for that organization, that may have been their value that we don't move fast because that's uncomfortable for us.
Yeah.
And so then it's about having that honest dialogue about this is what it's going to take to buy in, and we get back to that emotional aspect of how do we get different people to understand what's in it for them in order to win their hearts and minds, because sometimes moving fast might be part of the price of admission.
And with so many consultants on the call here, I feel like that's the unfairness of when a company hires a consultant to come in and try to change their culture and the way they do business. It's impossible. They're going to say they want you to burst forward and break through this inertia and break through all this noise and knock down these barriers and knock down these walls. But then they can't support that yet. They don't have the underpinning culture to accomplish that. So, I mean, that's the importance of us as consultants doing our research, setting realistic expectations on what the change is going to look like so that we have the capability to come in and win. But that's hard to do.
I want to say about the consultant piece. Many people become consultants because they hated the politics of big companies and they just want to fix stuff and do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? You need to be better with the politics. I need to be better. Everyone on this call needs to be better with the politics as a consultant than you were as a person in the company. And that means reading books like The Laws of Human Nature and The 48 Laws of Power and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it doesn't mean go spend another 3 days on journey mapping. Journey mapping is fantastic. But if we don't understand, they say they hire us for one thing. That's bullshit. They hire us for something that's real, but they probably haven't told you what that is yet. And it's our goal to figure out why they really hired us.
Yeah.
And then, figure out how to make it work.
Rough.
But no, I think that's well said, Chris. I think it's us being realistic about that is, yeah. This is what they said, but we've all been to that circus before. And so it's recognizing when we see those triggers that, okay, I see where I am now. I'm going to have to adjust accordingly and also help others in the organization adjust.
Yeah. I'm going to throw an electronic tomato at Chris on behalf of Dave Seaton for the journey mapping comments.
Journey mappings are great. I'm just saying, you don't do that first. You figure why you're there.
Maddie has a question.
Yeah.
I just that brings up a really good point, and I totally agree with that assessment that it's actually more incumbent on you as a consultant to figure that stuff out. And so I guess one thing I'd maybe throw back to Sean for the group or whatever is it would be great to have a better idea of how to interrogate that and a better idea of how to figure out a company that you're coming into as a consultant, to figure out where those power centers are by talking to them, and so that you can resonate with the right person and that you can sort of speak their language, right? And I'm sure there are questions you could ask that seem very innocent but actually reveal a lot about how a company like really operates, right? As opposed to how they say they want to operate.
That's a great point, Maddie, because you've got to get to the truth fast. Or
you're just wasting your time and you're wasting their time, right?
Yeah.
You can't promise you're going to do a bunch of stuff if you can't figure out how to make them do it. Like, you can't do it. You can propose it and give them the plan, but like, if they go, that's great, and then they never touch it again, forget it. You're useless to them.
Cool. Love it. So we put up a few examples of a language of change, which is definitely one method that helps to accelerate your ability to make change stick. But as mentioned, in the absence of that, my absolute default and something I've used in quite a few environments to success is the CXotR leading change model. And I love how it starts. It starts with establishing a sense of urgency. And what that means, like, you've got to get people to where they actually care. Because our amazing, famous default as human beings around changes is to kill it. And the number of really good change initiatives that I've seen die at the water cooler is fascinating, because people, they don't want to have to think about it. They don't want to have to acknowledge the change. They just want to fall back into their comfortable patterns. So until we activate folks and light a sense of urgency with the question of, you can't keep living this way. Here's how we've got to change together. Like, until you make that happen, the rest of the change cycle is irrelevant. So as CX leaders, there's a number of threads that we can pull depending on our audience. For more of the executive audience, it's that trigger of, you are losing market share because of the way you treat your customers. And there's a lot of math that we can use to support that. For more of a frontline organizational audience, it's that intrinsic motivator of, here's how we get to fulfill our promise to our customers. This is amazing what we get to do together. We do this better than anybody else in the world. And in order for us to maximize our impact and serve our customers in this way, this is what we must do together. This is how we make that happen. So there's different intrinsic motivators that can be used there to establish that urgency. But then, to the point of so many on this call already, the CX leader cannot do it. You cannot do it. You've got to earn allies. You've got to bring people in. And the scope of CX change is so wide that until you activate leaders across that entire customer lifecycle, you're not going to be able to lead the change. So establishing something in the form of a CX change coalition, that was the technique that I used most successfully at UL. It's amazing what ultimately happened when we weren't talking about CX for the sake of CX. We were talking about real customer centricity in the context of our organization, making the world a safer place, and what that looked like for technology, what that looked like for implementation services, what that looked like for customer support. We contextualized it. We worked on it together. We supported each other in that. We had great executive support. It's amazing how much acceleration of change happened because of that impactful and meaningful change coalition. And then, obviously the compelling change vision, that's kind of a more obvious one. But as we get into, and there are 8, I've selected these 6, empowering others to act. So one technique that I've used to accelerate change is tying it into the performance management cycle of the organization. Don't have customer-centric CX changes be over here and be peripheral. If they matter to the organization and you've effectively established a sense of urgency around why the change matters, then make it matter. Make it matter in the way that people are ultimately held accountable in the work that they do. Have some type of customer-centric goal that leads back to the CX initiative. Be that as one of their annual goals for everybody across the organization. The alignment that comes from that, the acceleration that comes from that, the accountability that comes from that. Don't try to do CX over here in some separate pocket from the natural change vehicles inside the organization that are already built in and existing. Tap into that existing momentum. And then ultimately, as Sean has already said, you've got to earn those quick wins. Everybody loves to play for a winning team. If people can see that change is inevitable, then they jump in and the resistance falls away. But when they can see and know that 90% of change initiatives that get put out in front of them in the organization just ultimately disappear, they can just ignore it to death. But when you get quick wins and when you show that change is inevitable, then you break down those barriers. And I think ultimately the most important one, and I love Annette Franz when she talks about how CX change is culture change. And at the end of the day, it is. I mean, we've embedded a mentality, we've activated people to truly care about customers and the promise we made. And here's specific behaviors that you get to do that ultimately reflect the desired experience that we're creating for them. But only when that's anchored in the culture. And my favorite definition of culture is just the way we do things. So in other words, the way we do things is we create this exceptional experience and we do that together. This is the outcome that we create as an organization. then you start to have the consistency, the loyalty impact. You can measure so many things ultimately in terms of the impact that you've made through the CX initiative. And that's how when new people come into the organization, the change doesn't dissipate. It doesn't lessen. It only becomes more and more compelling and more anchoring in terms of that new employee onboarding experience. So those are the biggest thing. If you don't have a common language of change yet, think about John Coder and that leading change model and some of the wisdom we can draw out of that. It will help you to accelerate change. So we've got a couple minutes. I would love to take a couple questions here. I'm sorry. Let's see what we got. Great comments in the chat here. Oh,
yeah, there's a lot of dialogue as you're reading through that. A lot of dialogue in the chat. Thank you so much for going back and forth, because you guys all made great additions too. Focus on culture and change, highlighting the price of non-compliance. All of these that are so important to this topic. And so if there is anybody who would like to jump in with kind of a final thought or question for Nate, raise your hand. But otherwise, we are kind of coming to the end of the time together.
love these comments in the chat. Thank you all so much for.
This is a really good group.
This was fun.
I'm in a bunch of these, and this is a good one.
Glad to hear it. Thanks, Maddie. So it's great. This was a great dialogue, and thank you so much for being here. We're going to continue. Obviously, these kind of meetings happen once a month, but then we're going to start in the next 2 months. We're going to start some a new version of our weekly sessions, because we do want more of what we just had, which is conversation as well. And we're going to take them into more bite-sized pieces, so 30-minute shots instead of full hours, so that maybe that works a little bit better as well. So thank you for joining today. Again, if you're not a member of CX on the Rocks Collective, go to the CXonTheRocks.com and join now. And we'll see you in the next events and in the community dialogue. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
See ya.